What's up, everybody? Brett here. We're back today looking at some more news from the Battle Brothers Blazing Deserts DLC. This time it's going to be Southern Arms. We're going to look at some of the new weapons. Oh my god, it's so distracting, Tiny. Tiny just started licking my feet right as I started talking. Tiny, stop. Alright. Dogs, guys. Not even once, right? Devlog 130, Southern Arms. You can kind of see in the picture here all of the new weapons they're going to be talking about. I'm excited. I couldn't help myself. I scrolled down. But let's just get into it. It says, naturally, the southern city-states of the Blazing Deserts DLC also have their own arsenal of weapons. Some are southern variants of weapons you already know, while others are entirely new and come with unique skills. You'll be able to buy them in the city-states and loot them from southern opponents. Let's take a look at a selection of them. So hopefully there's even more. That's what always gets me, is what weapons haven't I seen yet. And in the last DLCs, there's still weapons I haven't seen. I haven't seen any of the unique weapons from the Ancient Dead. Never seen one. And I've killed lots of Ancient Dead. So let's see here. The Scythe is how I'm pretty sure you pronounce that. I could be very wrong. If you've been playing Battle Brothers for a while, you may already know of the Scimitar and the Shamshir, both introduced with the Warriors of the North DLC. They were a teaser of a southern culture with their own arms to come, which now is about to arrive. As we're adding the Scythe, we're also doing some work on the existing Scimitar and Shamshir. That's probably a good idea. They're good weapons. I mean, a high-level Shamshir is basically like a noble sword with a little bit of a different kit to it. Quality-wise, anyway. And, yeah, they're awesome. Is this going to be... It looks like a completely different weapon. Let's actually just read it, because I'm not... My hypothesizing is pointless if it just tells me at the bottom what it does. A curved sword, the Scythe is excellent for cutting deep wounds. It's less suited for thrusting than straight swords, however, and therefore has a harder time penetrating armor. The Scythe is a southern variant of the northern short sword, and at the lowest tier... Okay, see, that's what I figured. They've actually arrayed it in such a way that it makes sense. So it goes from Scythe, then you start getting into the weaker scimitars, and then you start getting into the Shamshir at the highest end. All of those weapons share the slash skill with northern swords, but also have the unique gash skill, which is more likely to inflict serious injuries with adverse secondary effects than regular attacks are. So once again, things that inflict injuries, way worse versus the undead. However, swords are more accurate, so you get a little bit of a bonus there, but causing injuries is definitely something you want to do versus human or beastly opponents. So not all injuries are equally useful against opponents, and many of the cutting injuries inflicted by the gash skill were previously among the weaker ones. We've combed through all cutting injuries to rectify this. Inflicting a deep chest cut, for example, will now always reduce an opponent's hit points by a percentage of their maximum hit points, in addition to any damage your attack caused, rather. It may not make much of a difference against brigand thugs who won't have a lot of hit points to begin with, but it can mean a lot against barbarians, orcs, and many beasts. As cutting injuries become more worthwhile to inflict, the Crippling Strikes perk will become a more worthwhile pick, particularly if used together with the Scythe, Scimitar, and Shamshir to basically guarantee an injury. And then also, of course, if you're taking Crippling Strikes, you better be taking Executioner. And at that point, you're getting so much bonus damage. They're taking bonus damage, or they're having all these deleterious effects, and you're able to just cut them to pieces. Once again, I've done that build. It's a great build. It just leaves you hanging in an undead crisis, essentially, is the worst time. But, you know, it's a sacrifice. If everyone on your team has Crippling Strikes as well as Executioner, you're basically just guaranteeing bonus damage. Yeah, and then basically you're screwed in the Black Monolith. But every other fight, you're doing pretty good. Alright, shields. Very cool. Pole Mace is spoiled. Alright. Scroll down a little bit. Can I get it? Yes. All right. So identical in function to other shields already in the game, but with somewhat different stats, Southerners also have their own shield designs that show how well their arms are inspired by those of historical Arabian and Persian cultures. I love it. I don't know if these are going to be all of the shields. There may be a tier system, just like in Northern shields. These may be like a... So, what is it? I almost never use those shields. So you've got your regular, like your light shields. The little tiny, like, they're almost bucklers, essentially. Then you've got your regular round shields. So that's like, you got like tier 0.5 and tier 1 is more how I think of it. Then you've got a bunch of stuff in the middle at tier 2. You've got heater shields, kite shields, and all manner of other shields. And then at the tier 3 spectrum, without going too crazy with my tier list, you've got better stuff. You've just got the more unique things like, I mean, obviously the Kraken shield would be way high up on the list, but shields you make from scrat, you've got, and then other famed shields and Lindworm shields. Those things would all be on the highest end of the spectrum. Where does this fall? I would have to imagine probably, if these aren't unique designs for new famed shields, which I know they could be, they're beautiful enough, honestly. If these are just shield designs for these new shields, then they're probably somewhere around the kite shield, heater shield stats. How they're going to be reflective of that is very interesting to know. Maybe they're lighter, perhaps. Maybe they go something like that route. Little less protective, little heavier, maybe better rounded stats. Heater shield's good versus melee. Kite shield's good versus ranged. However, kite shield does have the edge in terms of overall number of stats, like just sheer by the numbers. You're going to get more stats from a kite shield than you will from a heater shield. However, if you're fighting an all melee force, a kite shield is less relevant than a heater shield. So there's lots of balance in Battle Brothers. But where they go with this, I would have to imagine it could be smaller. It could be heavier even. I mean, they look like they're made out of metal. If that's the case, I mean, that would be interesting. Straight up just heavier shields, even more, like just better than a heater shield, perhaps. We'll have to see. And whenever I think of like these type of circular shields, I always think smaller. When they're made out of metal, I think smaller. I think more of a buckler, right? More of a what's the thing? I always forget the words I'm looking for whenever I go to think of it. But the smaller shields, I think it's a buckler that's strapped to your arm. They're very much, they're just not big at all. They're just used to catch blows more skillfully than you would if you were just using a large round shield. But yeah, just a lot of speculation. Not sure, guys. I think they could go either way with this. I think typically, probably in ancient times, if you make a shield out of metal, it's going to be way heavier than one made out of wood and that's banded with metal. The metal is used to give the wood structure and stability, but the wood is what's taking the damage, and it's also cheap. It's cheaper for your common foot soldier to have a wooden shield than it is for them to have some highly decorated and engraved and lacquered, metal shield with some like wood inlay or whatever, something super fancy that just wouldn't be practical. So it makes sense for me that these could be some higher end heater shields, but perhaps with some sort of better effect. We don't know. It says different stats. We'll see exactly what that entails as we get into it. Pure speculation, guys. It's fun for me to speculate, so if I sound like an idiot, I am, but it's still fun. So the pole mace, next weapon. Southern armies are rather fond of maces, and so you'll find a variety of southern maces with stats slightly different from their northern cousins while in the city-states. In fact, they also mounted a mace on a long pole and aptly called it a pole mace. It offers the advantages of a regular mace combined with the range of a polearm. I love it. The pole mace inflicts additional damage to fatigue with every blow. Using its secondary skill, a target can be stunned for one turn over a distance of 2 tiles. They're going to have range stuns. So, of course, when you see something like this, you're like, oh man, my brothers can use this. It's going to be fun. But what you need to remember is whenever you start fighting groups of 20, 30 of these guys, these like desert raiders or whatever type of southern unit will use these dudes, or maybe the city-state's own armies, in the same way that we have to fight billmen and be terrified of bill hooks just slicing through our, freshly level 11 brothers at the first in-game crisis. We're going to have to be terrified of like a fat stack of city-state soldiers coming out with these and just bopping us on the head over and over and over again. Instead of all those arming swords and bill hooks, they might just have tons of maces. And then you're playing the please don't stun me game. And that's weapons like this, if you're find yourself fighting them a lot, and we'll definitely see what a lot entails, you're going to want to have the... there are perks that... Man, I'm drawing a blank, of course. There are perks that prevent you from getting stunned. There are perks that protect you from being hit in the head. Anything that does that might be useful if you find yourself fighting these weapons a lot. I think this is awesome. I love having another alternative to a bill hook. Time will tell if this is as good as a bill hook. To me right now, just pure speculation, we've got the pole hammer, which is also very different, and we've got the long axe. Now, the pole hammer is great, but I've done the math many, many times. I think you're just better off using either a long axe or a bill hook, depending on what you're fighting. And those are both cutting weapons. Maybe the pole hammer gets a tiny buff. It probably doesn't really need it. It kind of occupies this great, like, tier 2.5 space, while the long axe and the bill hook enjoy kind of like tier 3 status. The long axe, not so much purely for the damage, but for, it does do a lot of damage, but also for kind of the versatility and the usefulness. It also is like your KO weapon versus Scrat, great versus Lindworms, that sort of thing. But this weapon, we'll see. It might, to me, to my eyes, this looks like another variant of kind of the pole hammer. And I could definitely see strategies that you want to employ where maybe you just have a back line. Like, I like just have quick hand guys in my back line. You know, maybe I have 5 archers in the back line, right? They all switch to one of these whenever times get tough, right? Whenever they close into melee. You could do full stun builds if you wanted to. You could go all maces in the front, all two-handed maces in the back. It sounds awesome. I don't know. It opens some stuff up is all I'm trying to say. I think it's very cool. And it drains fatigue. There are some enemies like the undead that don't care about fatigue. But let's say you're surrounding an orc warrior. You want to get some hits off on an orc warrior. Stop him from shield walling and hitting you every turn. Getting his fatigue down as fast as possible is going to be the best way to do that. Okay. The Nomad Sling. A sling is a weapon that I want to use a lot. But I just find, especially in the early game when it's the most viable, your brothers just kind of suck, and you end up kind of scrounging together an early bow, and then you kind of don't need the sling anymore, and it's just, you know, I understand its versatility, and I love the fact that it gives you free ammunition. It's got its uses, but it's so hard to love. The South is no less plagued by banditry and pillaging than the North is. While the North has brigands lying in ambush along the road, the South has desert raiders descending upon trade caravans. These desert raiders, or nomads as they're sometimes called, have some equipment not otherwise available, including one particular weapon, the Nomad Sling. A simple weapon used since ancient times, and the favorite of many a shepherd, a sling is used to hurl stones towards the enemy. The Nomad Sling is a higher tier variant of the existing staff sling, with similar strengths and weaknesses, but better suited for the later parts of a campaign. That's awesome. It's not particularly accurate or damaging, but with stones abundant everywhere, it will never run out of ammunition. 2 stones can be hurled each turn, and on hitting a target in the head, it will inflict the dazed status effect. I love it. So just like the whip has more than one variant, I think there are essentially 3. There's like a cheap whip, there is a Beastmaster whip, and then there's a higher tier whip. So there's at least 3, and not counting famed tier whips. It makes sense to me that there's perhaps a better designed sling, and I would love to actually, like, imagine you get one of these in the early game. I'm much more inclined to use a Nomad Sling if I can get it in the early game over a standard staff sling. It's a cool weapon, and it saves you a fortune in terms of ammunition. So the Quaddle Dagger. The Quaddle Dagger is a short curved blade notoriously used by assassins of the southern deserts. Like northern daggers, it's intended for quick attacks. Unlike northern daggers, it's not meant to puncture weak points of armor, but to cut throats of debilitated opponents. Interesting. Using its death blow skill, this dagger inflicts significantly increased damage to targets which have the dazed, stunned, or sleeping status effects. Interesting. Can we put people to sleep? No way, right? It's much less fatiguing to use the puncture skill of other daggers, and it can be used than the puncture skill of other daggers, rather, and it can be used 3 times a turn with the Dagger Mastery perk. It works best, of course, in a combo with other equipment used to debilitate opponents, such as the new Flash Pot available from Alchemist, makes sense, or that Nomad Sling shown above. That's exactly what I was wondering. When I see, like, sleeping as a thing, like, in order for that to even be relevant at all, we would have to have the ability to put people to sleep. So I'm wondering if, in combination with, like, the flash pots, if there's some sort of potion out there, it's like some sleep powder, I don't know, whatever, that we can put opponents to sleep. Otherwise, we don't really have the means to do this. There are very few things in the game that put stuff to sleep. Combination with the Nomad Sling, I can see that being good. Combination with us stunning with pole maces and stuff should be fine. But what I'm worried more about is the enemy's ability to do this. So I think we're going to get attacked by Desert Raiders. They're all going to have daggers, pole maces, and Nomad Slings, and they're just going to combo the crap out of us. And that's what I'm thinking more is going to happen. And then last but not least, guys, probably one of the coolest looking weapons I've seen. I always, and every RPG I play, I'm either a shield guy or essentially a sword lance, a polearm guy. Like that's my go-to, and this is a sweet looking weapon. If you've already learned, the city-states were built atop the ruins of the ancient empire. It's no surprise then that they also inherited some of their weapons. The sword lance is a sharp, curved blade attached to a long pole and used to deliver deep, sweeping strikes over a distance of 2 tiles. It's effectively a war scythe, that's what I was about to say, that performs slightly worse against armor, but is much more durable because it isn't lying in some sealed crypt for hundreds of years. Like all polearms, the sword lance can be used to strike a single target over a distance of 2 tiles. Its unique feature is the ability to perform sweeping strikes in a wide arc that hit 3 adjacent tiles in counterclockwise order over some distance, which can cause mayhem in the opponent's back line. There's more new weapons coming with unique mechanics, and we'll take a look at those as well over the coming weeks. So, it's almost like just kind of legitimizing the war scythe, which is a weapon when you get it in the earlier mid game. You're probably not going to get it in the early game. When you get it in the mid game, you're happy to get it. You're like, oh wow, this is kind of a cool tool that pretty much everything I'm fighting has no defense against. You know, you fight some big group of undead, you hit 3 guys in the back with a war scythe, or you're fighting bandits or orcs. It's an amazing weapon. The DPS that it outputs turn after turn is unbelievable, especially if you're effective with it, right? If you've got a polearm master that, you know, has really high melee skill, it's a devastating weapon. But giving a variant that perhaps, you know, it says it's worse versus armor, so maybe it's just a worse weapon overall. But what this does is it opens up options for famed variants, legendary variants of this item. So, or this weapon rather. So there's an option to get one of these that is just sick, and that's what got me excited. So I can already see a guy having one of these that's famed perhaps, and just cutting down dudes. Very cool weapons. I highly approve of everything I just read. Giving you an early access to a scimitar style weapon. We're purely speculating on the function of the shields. It even says here they're probably not much difference. It's somewhat different stats. So, you know, just some tweaking of the kind of the system that I laid out. Pole maces, I think, are an excellent inclusion. They make a lot of sense to me. Nomad slings, I love giving them a second tier. I think it's a great idea to keep them relevant into the mid game. I doubt they'll ever be relevant in the late game, but I mean, unless you have a highly synergistic strategy, you're using tons of Quaddle Daggers and pole maces and the kind of synergy that I described. And the sword lance, I think, is an awesome way to bring the war scythe style weapons into the forefront. So, guys, that's going to be it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of the news we just got. Southern Arms, Devlog 130. Guys, I'm Brett. My channel is Goodtalk Gaming. As always, y'all, I will see you in the next one. Take care, guys. And also, just a quick note, I talk about it in my last Battle Brothers videos. I'm going to talk about it a little bit probably in every video. Just stay safe, guys. Coronavirus is a thing that is, if it's not hurting as many people as it's scaring, perhaps, but it's definitely gonna ravage some communities. So just be on your toes out there. It's affecting my life in some pretty serious ways. It's affecting my college. It's affecting my kids going to school. It may affect my wife and her job. She currently works in a restaurant. You know, that's going to be one of those things that is going to be the first to go if stuff starts going kind of bad. So make preparations, be safe, like I said, and yeah, hope you guys get some relief from bad news in my videos. I definitely get some relief in talking to y'all. And anyway, y'all, just as one friend to another, I'll see you in the next one. Later, y'all.